Our national parks and our designated landscapes and our triple SIs already cover 30% of Wales. But we know that inside those designated landscapes, we have massive biodiversity loss and some of the most um, nature depleted land, in
Yeah.
the UK. And the UK is a nature depleted land. So, what we will be doing is we will be putting the targets into law. We'd be putting an environmental governance system around them so that it has, teeth. It can hold oncoming government's feet to the fire about doing it.
Welcome to Political Sandbox by Chamber for today's special episode with Minister for Climate Change, Julie James, from the Welsh Government. If you find these videos useful, please like and subscribe, and you can also visit our website at chamberuk.com. My name is Miles Bennington. I'm the editor of the Chamber Journal. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, Borda.
Bodada, yes. My stepmother this morning taught me to say Bodada because she's from Snowdonia, and so she was very insistent that I greet you like that, and I've clearly failed.
Well, Borda just means good morning or good day. So, uh,
Oh well,
That's fine.
I need to practice. Um, right then, I just wanted to start today by asking you. I've got some questions on climate change here, and my first one is: what action of this Welsh government in mitigating climate change are you most proud of?
we've got a long list of things that I'm pretty proud of, what we've been doing here in Wales, although there's obviously a lot more to do as well. So I'm particularly proud that we were able to declare the climate and nature emergencies, the dual emergencies. The declaration in itself is important, but actually it drives a lot of action by local authority and other partners across Wales. And it's important to set the scene really for what we're trying to do. So that's like the first one. And the interlinking of the two crises is really important as well. They definitely feed each other. So we're really, really pleased to do that. The very fact that I exist, the climate change portfolio, is in itself an achievement, driven by the Youth Parliament in Wales. By the way, we give the Youth Parliament in Wales a pledge that we will implement their top three policies, and one of them was to have a minister for climate change. So that's really excellent. So I'm really proud of that as well. And the fact that this government has always said that climate change and nature renewal is at the heart of everything we do. So it's not just the fact that we've pulled this portfolio together with a lot of the levers for climate change inside it, but actually that I have a lot of influence right across the government in pulling together things like our net zero plans, for example, which are pretty comprehensive, or our carbon budgets, which are also comprehensive. And now we're starting to work on our 30 by 30 goals really actively, and we'll be, able to put those ambitions into our legislation. We're also very proud here in Wales of our Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which pushes our public authorities into taking into account the well-being of future generations in every decision that they make. And we've still got a long way to go, but this starts to embed the whole idea of looking to see what affect each and every one of your decisions, even if superficially they don't seem to be affecting the climate and nature emergencies, to just see what that decision may or may not do for the well-being of future generations. So, we've got a whole kind of direction of travel here in Wales, if I can put it that way, which I think is a really good one. And politicians aren't around for very long. All we can really do is shift the ship of state so that it's going in the right direction. So I'm pretty pleased with where we've got to so far. And now, in my last few years of service, I'd like to kind of accelerate the ship in that direction, really.
Well, it's interesting that you say you've got that wide-ranging brief that touches all different elements of government. What element of decarbonising the economy do you think is going to be hardest for Wales, and how can because obviously this will come with opportunities but also it will be a wrenching change for some people. How can the Welsh government reduce the harm that decarbonisation might bring?
So Part of our zero strategy and our carbon budget strategies are about making sure that we have what we call a just transition, so that we don't disadvantage the already most disadvantaged parts of our society, as has happened in other industrial revolutions. And part of that is to protect industrial clusters with high paying, high skilled jobs that are essential to our economy, but are pretty carbon intensive. So actually, Wales has a much higher proportion of the industry that's left in the UK than our size would let you believe. We also have more gas power providing power right across the UK sited here in Wales. So, there are things that we'd like to have a look at. We obviously want to shift to renewables as fast as possible. I think we just take that as read, and we've got a really ambitious strategy for doing that. I just announced the upping of all the targets for us just a week or so ago. Um, but we're working really hard so we've got a big oil industry here, a refinery industry here. We've got a big steel plant here. So we work really closely with those industries to make sure that they have net zero plans in place, and that we understand what they need from emissions trading schemes. We understand what they need in terms of the research for carbon capture, for example. So we have a whole series of things we do. We facilitate working groups between clusters. We've got a South Welsh industrial cluster, for example, that we work very closely with. And then we feed what they want back into the UK emissions trading authorities, for example, and so on. So, we're very aware that we need that just transition. But just to also say, this is a truism, but I think it's always worth pointing out, we can't build a renewable industry without steel. So, and steel is a carbon intensive industry at the moment, although we are working hard with them to try and make sure that we can, make steel in different ways and reduce the carbon footprint. But it's actually really important to us that we produce as much of that steel in Wales as possible, so that we keep the kind of the profit and the employment that goes with that. So again, we've been working very hard with our industries to make sure that the big new opportunity that is the Celtic Sea for floating wind, for example,
Mm.
can be really captured in Wales. So we've been working with our port authorities, with our steel industry, with our industrial clusters to make sure that our supply chains are ready to go, so that as that opportunity comes forward and as the auction results are announced, and they've just done the North Wales fixed wind auction results, and we expect the Celtic Sea one shortly, that we have worked together with Team Wales, as we call it, to sort of to make sure that we're as ready as it's humanly possible to be to take advantage of that. And then alongside that, we've got a whole series of other initiatives that go with it. So we've got a really ambitious plan to decarbonise the NHS and all of our hospitals, for example. We ask our public authorities to have decarbonisation plans throughout. We work with our industrial clusters right through Wales and with our commerce clusters right through Wales to see what they can do to decarbonise. We've got really ambitious plans around net zero for our new social homes. We've just shifted our Part L of our building regs. Sorry for the um, quite nerdy kind of
Well, no,
legal
I
stuff.
think
But we've just shifted that so that all new build in Wales has to be 37% more efficient than it was prior to the regulations. And in 2 more years' time, we'll go to 78% more efficient. So we've got a pipeline coming through. And then the one I particularly love is we've got a My Tree Our Forest initiative going on at the moment. So we give out a tree to every household in Wales. You can click through on the website if you're not lucky enough to have a place to plant your tree. You can click through on the websites and ask us to plant the tree for you, and we will keep you in touch with that tree. We're trying to connect people back into nature. And the last one, so I've got a long list, sorry. The last one I really want to highlight, although there are several others I'm sure we'll talk about, is that for every child born in Wales, we plant a tree. And we also planted a tree in Mbale in Uganda, because that was a very deforested area of the planet, and we've been helping them reforest for a long time. And I think I'm right in saying we're up to 10 million trees in Mbale. Not that we've got 10 million children in Wales. We've been planting other trees as well. And as a result of that, that country has been able to have a much more sustainable economy, and they haven't had the desertification. I can never say that right, but you know what I mean. That they would have had with the loss of tree cover. So we play a part on the global stage as well. And I've got a long, long list of other things that I'm sure we'll get round to.
Well, I'm going to have to get my parents to get in touch with to get their tree.
Yes, absolutely. The hubs reopen on the 20th of February when the next tree planting season starts. So tell them to be in touch. They're all over Wales.
It's in the diary. um, One industry that's going to be very affected by biodiversity and by decarbonisation, and which is particularly important to Wales, is farming. Obviously, the vast majority of land in Wales is used for farming, and I was just hoping to get your thoughts on how the farming sector can balance the need to maintain yields, to stay competitive in a global market, to increase biodiversity, and to reduce their use of fossil fuels, both in their processes, but also their fossil fuel derived use of fertilizer. And obviously, those it's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard question for you, but it's going to be a big change for especially Wales.
Yes, so we work very closely with the farming union. So farming is one of the only things that isn't in my portfolio actually, but I work with my colleague Leslie Griffiths, who's the Rural Affairs Minister, on this, and we are just introducing our sustainable farming scheme, which is our replacement for the old European schemes. We've been working very closely with our farmers to really make sure that we get the very best from our land. So what we're trying to do is make sure that our farmers use the least carbon intensive methodology, that we push actually local food, local resource, seasonal food, seasonal resource, that we help the farmers, sell into the market, if you like. And we've been, just as an aside, we've got a public procurement strategy that facilitates that. So we very much encourage our schools, our local authorities, our residential homes, all of the places where we provide the food to make sure that they source local food
Big
in
level.
order to do that. Um, and then we work with our supermarkets. So Leslie does this, not me, but we work with our supermarkets to make sure that we have decent supply chains from local markets and so on. But also, we've started to work very hard on, and we've just begun this project since COP26, so a couple of years ago. We've worked very hard to start to try and reduce our global deforestation footprint. So that is about not buying in stuff that means that other countries suffer deforestation. And actually that helps our farmers because it pushes people towards local foods, local supply chains and so on. Um, and then there's a whole series of things that we're doing through the sustainable farming scheme, which we probably don't have time to go into all of them at the moment. But that is about paying farmers for effectively ecosystem services. So if you restore your peat bog, if you restore your sphagnum moss at the top of the riverhead and so on, then you help us with the natural flood defences that the country should have. Well, we're paying you as part of the sustainable farming scheme to do that. We're paying you to put more of your land under tree cover where appropriate. It's not appropriate everywhere, but where it's appropriate. If you farm on grassland or peatland, then we're paying you to start habitat recovery as well as produce food. So, if you ask a farmer, what do I do? They say I produce food. That's their kind of mission, isn't it? But actually, of course, farmers do very much more than that. They steward the countryside. They provide the habitat for people. They provide the very air we breathe, literally. So, trying to make sure that they come together to understand that. And then the last big piece I will just talk about is we had a big summit last summer to talk about phosphates across Wales, because we have real problems with phosphates in a large number of our SAC rivers. So special areas of conservation rivers, and we have a number of those in Wales, and in particular we have what's called the Brecon Beacons mega catchment, which has the big Wye and Usk, and a number of others, the Taff and the Ely and various other rivers coming out of it, um, and we have a real problem with phosphate. So we've put agricultural pollution regulations in place here in Wales. We've been through all kinds of litigation and all the rest of it as a result of it. But anyway, it's done and dusted now. Um, so what that summit did was it asked each sector in Wales to stop pointing the finger at other sectors, which is we're having a little bit of, and actually just look to its own house and put it in order. And since then, we've been facilitating a whole series of task and finish groups for each sector. So the house builders, the farmers, the water companies, every sector that's been involved, really, industrial, all of them. And then there's another summit due now in February, a follow up, where we're going to agree the action plan that all of these task and finish groups have come together with. So each sector will have its own action plan to strip out phosphates and other unwanted nutrients from its
Mm.
procedures. So just to give an example, um, there's a huge big deal in the public at the moment about chicken farms,
Yes.
intensive poultry units, for example. Um, you know, so there are three things there that are contradictory. So first of all, there's a huge demand for chicken in the food market. Secondly, we encourage our farmers to diversify, and many of them are diversifying into poultry units. But thirdly, they produce very high nutrient chicken manure as a result. And in many places in Wales, we do not want that spread on the land because it is already very high in nutrients. So we are currently consulting on a licensing scheme, which means that the farmers will have a license to spread the stuff, but they will have to test the soil first. So if the soil is already at a level it doesn't need any, they won't be able to spread. But much more importantly, we will help them find markets for that actually very sellable product. So instead of treating it as a waste product or a byproduct, we actually sell it as an actual product because there are places all over the world that actually want high phosphate, high nitrate fertilizers. So you can take a problem and what we try to do is solve it by making it a plus, really. So if I can put it in that way.
For a more circular economy.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
that brings us nicely on to my next questions, which are about biodiversity. Obviously, the runoff of extra nutrients and phosphates into the sea can cause problems for marine habitats. Um, and in the last 50 years across the UK, but also in Wales, we've seen significant losses in biodiversity. Um, while the Welsh Government are committed to maintaining and enhancing biodiversity, isn't it time to try and restore that biodiversity that's already been lost to where it has been in the past?
Yep. So definitely. So we're very invested in the 30 by 30 goals that have just been announced coming out of COP15. And I had the real privilege of being at COP15 as part of the uh, a terrible name. We're going to have to find a better name for this, but basically subnational, regional, and city governments of the world who really came to the seventh summit for them at the beginning of COP15, and who really came together and I think had a very major effect on pushing the UN nation states into actually agreeing 30 by 30 goals. So that alliance of terribly named subnational states, um, it covers two-thirds of the world's population. So, irrespective of the UN state that you belong to, it's the regional and local governments that actually do the business on the ground. So, actually, it had a really interesting surge of kind of almost evangelical enthusiasm to get some of this done. And so it made me come back even more um, determined than we were previously to get our 30 by 30 in place. So I've just undertaken something we called a deep dive on biodiversity in Wales. I had a whole series of experts come together to help us look at what needs to be done to get that action plan together. And I think it's just really important for people to understand this. So if I could just say that we needed to designate 30% of the land in Wales as designated landscape, job done. Well, we've already done that. Our national parks and our designated landscapes and our triple SIs already cover 30% of Wales. But we know that inside those designated landscapes, we have massive biodiversity loss and some of the most um, nature depleted land, in
Yeah.
the UK. And the UK is a nature depleted land. So what we will be doing is we will be putting the targets into law. We'll be putting an environmental governance system around them so that it has teeth. It can hold oncoming government's feet to the fire about doing it, and then we will review all of our designated landscapes to see what needs to be done as an action plan in that space to not only halt biodiversity loss, but to reverse it. And that includes the climate adaptation because we're seeing species all over Wales moving north or moving to different places. And we've got, really iconic species like the curlew and stuff that are really struggling. So we have to do this quickly. So the 30 by 30 goal, as you know, is by 2030. So that's only 7 years away. For governments, that's speedy. So we're really working at some pace now to get some of this stuff in place.
And it's important to get inertia from different levels of governments, as you were saying. Um, just speaking of action plans, I was hoping to get a quick reaction to you to the recent UK government announcement of their aim for everyone in England to live within 15 minutes walk of a green space or of natural water.
So, that's a great aim. So that's the 15-minute neighbourhood that we've been talking about here in Wales for a long time, and sense of place. All of our planning policies have been directed towards that for some time here in Wales. So it's great to see them come on board with that. But there's no money attached to it. So that's all very well, but how are you going to do it if there's no money? And what the UK government really doesn't do is step up to its obligations and responsibilities in terms of funding this. So while we were at COP15, various um, governments were making pledges. The Quebec government, which is obviously a province of Canada, not Canada itself, pledged 650 million for biodiversity recovery. And in the same conference, the UK government pledged 29 million and then made it clear that 5 million of that wasn't new money. I mean, it's embarrassing, to be honest. So, I welcome the ambition. For goodness sake, let's sort out the finance. We need to finance this. This is a really, really important thing. And then the last bit that people just don't get is actually this is fundamental to our economy. There have been several reports over the last 2 weeks, maybe you've seen them, that point out that the green economy is worth far more than people were predicting. So, these are jobs. Making parks is a job. Planting trees and harvesting them is a job. Make the economy deliver the ambition, and that's the bit they're not doing. And I, it's nice to see the ambition coming along at last, but with no money behind it, how are they going to do that? How are you going to make everyone in the centre of London live within 15 minutes of a green space if you're not going to fund it?
I will. The next time I speak to one of the representatives, I will pass those questions on. Um, as you mentioned, you're starting to see species move north. I know personally, where I spend some time in Snowdonia, we've seen collared doves sort of come along where we've never had them, well, or at least it feels like a new change. And as climate change moves from a hypothetical to a reality, uh, what do you think are going to be the biggest effects that you see in Wales, and what sort of areas do you think will be hardest hit by that change?
So for Wales, we're a hugely coastal community, and quite clearly, we have real serious problems in the fact that many of our largest conurbations are on flat coastal plains by river mouths. And in the past, those are great places because they were where trade happened, they were where building was easiest, and all the rest of it. Now they're under serious threat of flooding, and some coastal communities are already seriously affected by that. So we've been running a huge program of coastal defence programs. In some places, and we haven't. I just want to really emphasise that we have not actually said this of any community outright, but it's quite clear that we cannot protect all the communities of Wales because they are in really seriously affected coastal risk areas. But I represent the centre of Swansea. Centre of Swansea is called Sandfields. It's called Sandfields for a reason. It's a sand field and it's at sea level. So, you know, a minimal rise in sea level floods the city. So clearly we have to look very hard at coastal defences. But also we're having a really big conversation here in Wales about something we call TAN 15, which is the planning system that controls where you can build in floodplains and so on. So we're in a very long consultation process with our local authorities because we have asked them to undertake serious flood containment plans, to talk to me about the pipeline for funding that over the short, medium, and longer term. and then only to build in places that are resilient to flooding effectively. So, that's a huge big deal for us. And we're going to have to really, look to how we're going to put that in place. But we're not the only place in the UK who needs to do that. The UK has a large number of its cities in exactly that position.
And I'll have to ask other layers of government. Like you say, this is going to be a long term challenge, and although adaptation is going to be expensive, there may. What I did want to ask you was, do you think there will be any positive effects or opportunities for Wales, given this, given the climate change that we are almost certainly likely to see?
Um, well, we have to adapt is the point there. So we have a climate change adaptation plan in place, and we have to try and adapt to that. So we have to make sure that we are growing crops that are resilient to both drought and floods. We have to make sure that our iconic species have habitat preservation, but we also have to prepare for incoming species from elsewhere that may be very welcome, but are not things we often see. I'm not a twitcher myself. I have a daughter who's a very serious bird watcher, and she tells me she's seen birds over the last. She's just done a big garden bird watch for the ISPB over the weekend. She said she's seen birds that she hasn't seen in the UK before. Uh, quite frequently over the last year or so. So, there are clearly species moving north, aren't there, for that? We need to adapt to that. So I'm not sure if it's an opportunity exactly, but we have to basically be able to live with the climate that's coming because change is coming. And just in Wales this last year, we had a very long drought over the summer. I grew up in Wales. If you had told me when I was, your age, that there would be a summer in which there was no rain, I would have just laughed because, how could that happen in Wales? And then now, after that, we've had the coldest period we've ever had and the wettest period we've ever had. So that what we're adapting to is like extremes. So, we need to be a lot more resilient to that. And, there will be some opportunities, I guess, there for different crops and different things. But really, what we need to do is get our adaptation plan in place so that we can adjust and be resilient to that across all of our communities. And we've got a prepared plan for that, and we're starting to roll it out. I just want to mention one last thing that I didn't mention, and it's one of the things I most like. So I'm going to jump back to a previous bit for one moment. Um, so we've been doing a big peatland restoration program right across Wales. We've been asked across the globe to show people how we've been doing it, and it's been really successful. And I just wanted to say that as one of the opportunities as well, because it's part of our natural flood defence. So we've had much less flooding on the rivers that we've put back the ecosystem services in. So where we've restored the peat bogs at the top of the rivers, then those rivers have not flooded to the extent that we had before because obviously the water has been absorbed into the land
And
higher up the
obviously,
system.
preventing the loss of peat is also a carbon sink.
And it's a carbon sink, exactly. And also it's a habitat. So the curlew live on grasslands that grow on peat. So, I just wanted to point out that there are lots of things that you get a lot of opportunity out of a single kind of program, really. So, that program restores the peat, gives us a carbon sink, gives us a habitat restoration, gives us a biodiversity recovery, and provides an ecosystem service for natural flood defences.
Helps the curlew and keeps your daughter happy.
Well, exactly. But, that is productive land then. That's productive land for the farmer too, because peat is an amazing resource, when it's in the ground, I mean. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I hadn't. I'm particularly proud of that. And I was talking about it at COP15 quite a lot. So I should have mentioned it earlier.
All right. Speaking of big changes that have happened over the last year, obviously the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent spikes in energy, particularly gas prices, have shown just how dependent we are on international fossil fuel markets. And I was just wondering, what can the Welsh government do to protect consumers in particular in the future?
Yeah. So, um, this is I've been a bit depressed really by the UK government's kind of response to this because the knee-jerk reaction to go back into fossil fuels has been really depressing from our point of view. Um, you know, Wales has enough natural resource all by itself to provide the energy needs for the UK. What we need is investment to do it. The Welsh Government can't do that alone. We will do what we can, but we need an energy plan that ensures continuity of supply and the pace of exploiting that supply as fast as possible. So we need to do that in a way that also captures the profit and the benefits of that for the people of the UK and in my instance for the people of Wales. We need to support the energy transition as fast as we can at some serious pace. So we've made a number of announcements in this space over the last few months. So we've just announced that we're establishing a state energy renewable developer here in Wales to develop onshore wind in our woodland estate, for example. Um, but also to capture more of the community, more benefit for our community. Um, so we'll be the first of all the UK home nations to have that publicly owned developer. Um, we've got a huge opportunity on our woodland estate. So we've already got 4 projects which have 441 megawatts of power, and we've got another 134 megawatts in development right now, and so we've got a big opportunity there. Um, you know, but we want to do that in a way that means that the real benefit of that, the profit of it, as well as the energy, comes to the Welsh people, so that they're getting a real boost from that, and that's where our economy should be going. And in my humble opinion, what we need is to completely redo the energy price system that we have here in the UK. There have been a number of international reports from the IMF and so on, which are full of doom and gloom for the UK economy. And one of them is about the high cost of energy. And that's not just for those, us domestic people, that's for Tata Steel. That's for our global companies that are trying to compete. The fact that we're still attached to the marginal price of gas is just beyond a joke, frankly. So, we are producing huge amounts of renewables, and that renewable energy is being sold at the same price as gas. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Would you be concerned that decreasing the price that renewable generators can get for their energy will diminish investment in renewables and thereby slowing the transition? Or do you think that they can get the price that will still allow for that investment?
Um, well, so that's quite a complicated answer, so forgive me. So at the moment, we have 2 different processes that are run by the UK government. We have the auction of the Crown Estates opportunities in the Celtic Sea or in the off the north coast of Wales for fixed wind. And those are being auctioned to the highest bidder, so for the highest price. So no local supply chain. It's a tick box. So will you use a local supply chain? Yes, no. So if you say yes, tick. But there's nothing in the contract to enforce that, which is a really lost opportunity to my way of thinking. And then there's a contract for difference round, also run by the UK government, in which the companies are encouraged to put the lowest possible price in. So in between that is the supply chain. So that company that's now put the highest price in for the option to build and the lowest price in for the energy that it wants to sell is now going to squeeze its supply chain in the middle. Tell me how that makes any sense. So this is the UK government doing both of those things. So you're like, what are you trying to do? We should be building a supply chain and renewables market here that brings these jobs in. That's the benefit. That's the real long term investment benefit. But what you're doing is just maximizing a one off take to the treasury. So
I
that
was
is not sensible.
I was going to say I don't want to defend the UK government too much, but it will have been obviously as you say them prioritizing the treasury concerns rather than
That's exactly what they've done. And so the real risk then is that the big global multinational companies that are taking advantage of the auctions, because those are the only ones who can really bid into it, will default to the quickest and fastest and cheapest supply chain they can get, which will be in the countries they come from. So, UK PLC will lose out on all of that economic development, um, and the Treasury will have had a one off payment. That's not sensible.
So back to Wales for a moment. You mentioned some schemes to make sure that new housing is very efficient. I was just wondering for existing housing, is there is there anything that the Welsh Government is doing to make sure that their energy requirements, especially heating requirements, are reduced?
Yeah, so we have a series of things going on here. So we've got something called the Innovative Housing Program and also something called the Optimized Retrofit Program. So one of them is a new build that tests out a load of tech and different methods of building houses and so on. And that can be applied in a retrofit sense as well. So we've got a lot of tech trials. So we've been running that for 6 years. So we've got loads of data about what works and what doesn't, and that's being fed into the market. The Optimized Retrofit, we've asked a series of stockholding councils and registered social landlords to take every kind of house in Wales, because we've got loads of different sorts, obviously, and test out what works for that house and what is the best EPC standard that you can get that house to using different kinds of tech. So, we've got absolutely everything from 1800 stone built houses in our valleys to, ranch houses built in the 70s to whatever. We've got you name it, we've got it in Wales, right? So we want to make sure that, and a one size fits all program just does not work. We know that. And so we've already brought our social housing stock up through the Welsh Housing Quality Standard to EPCD, and we're about to announce the next iteration to get it up the next step. But we know that some of the things we did there for some houses caused real problems. So we want to make sure we don't have a one size fits all approach. And then we've got a whole series of grant programs for people on the lowest socioeconomic bands, Nest, Arbed, etc., that allow you to put energy efficiency measures into your home. In the past, that's been replacing your very inefficient gas boiler with a more modern, efficient gas boiler. But we've now announced that we won't be putting gas boilers in from 3 years' time. And then we're currently testing out what tech we will be putting in order to do that. And then very shortly, I hope we'll be able to announce some combination of grant loan schemes for householders who don't meet the income threshold to get the grant programs we've got in place. And there'll probably be, low cost loans and stuff for other people to get into. And then at the same time, we're shifting our building regs so that the new builds in the private sector are better, and everything we build in the social sector is low carbon or carbon neutral, depending on which test you use where. So we've got a whole series of things going on there. And also, we've been encouraging our councils through their LDP renewal process to consider what they can do locally in terms of what they're asking people to put on their house, on their new builds in particular.
Well, speaking of the councils, I'm just a bit conscious that we're running out of your time. But speaking of the councils, here at Chamber, we try to connect up different levels of UK politics, and from the councils to the Commons. What can different layers of government do to work more effectively together, in your opinion?
So, as I say, in Wales, we really work hard at this. We have a real Team Wales approach. I meet with the councils all the time. We work with them. I met with a series of councillors only yesterday to talk about their LDP process and what they could do. So we have a really integrated system. Yeah. So I was just saying that we have a really good system in Wales of talking at all levels to all groups of people. We really do have a Team Wales approach. And if you ask people in Wales, they will tell you that back, that there's a Team Wales approach. Thank you very much. Um, and so actually, we work very closely, in particular with the Welsh Local Government Association, the WLGA. We have a partnership council with them. It's on our agenda every 3 months. And we make sure that when we put policies in place, our delivery arms are in place to deliver it. So I'm pretty confident we're doing that properly.
I suppose the follow-up question to that is, do you feel like the Welsh Government and Westminster are working very well together on these issues?
Yes, so we work well with the Westminster government, especially at official level. It's been harder with the change of ministers. But we do work with them. We have a difference of political opinion, obviously, and of approach in some areas. We have robust discussions. But by and large, we do try to work very hard together because frankly, we cannot get to net zero in Wales unless the UK government does its part. So it's incumbent on us to work as well with them as we possibly can in order to deliver that.
Well, thank you. I'm very conscious that we've got to let you go, and no, thank you, Julie, so much for speaking with me today. If you've enjoyed this video, you can join the conversation by following us on Twitter at Chamber Voice, on Instagram at Chamber UK, and you can also visit our website at chamberuk.com. Thank you very much, Julie.
Pleasure.